So thank you very much for joining us this morning, and especially as you probably heard me say, many of you joining us this morning are new to the community. So you're very welcome indeed. We broadened out the invitation base to the Men's Employers community a while ago, so we're really delighted to welcome lots of new members to this webinar today, yeah, you're very welcome indeed. I'm joined today by the whole of the People Solutions team are here this morning. That is Karen Gibb, Chris Miles, Claire Stevens. And this is the second in our series of practical people management webinars. So the last one we're doing roughly one a month. Last month's was on the subject of managing disciplinary processes, which is still available via the community platform. And this time we're going to look at something quite different, which is HR technology. Like all things, we come at this from a very practical angle. Our clients are primarily small and medium-sized businesses that have stretched resources and limited budgets. So the question is, what genuine value is available from HR technology? We feel that we've got some experience to offer on this because over the last few years we've been helping our clients to implement systems and configure them to get the biggest bang for their buck. So we've learned a lot along the way, and it's that we'd like to share and discuss with you this morning. We very much welcome participation. It really, adds something, of course, if we can get into a bit of a discussion around it. So please use the chat function to post any questions. Claire's going to be keeping an eye on that in particular to make sure that we bring in any comments, questions, and if you want to join us, we can unmute you if you'd like to join in, or just post your questions in the chat and we'll deal with them that way. Bear in mind that we are recording this session so that we can add it to the community platform, and those that couldn't make it today are able to go and enjoy it at their leisure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to Chris first. So Chris is our kind of chief systems implementer. I'm going to ask first, which is, when clients talk to us about implementing a system, what is it, what might trigger that thought?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ed. I mean, the majority of clients that we talk to who are considering looking for an HR system are usually managing their employee data quite often on a spreadsheet. We did have one client who actually had paper files still, but certainly it was on a spreadsheet. Obviously with spreadsheets, you've got a number of concerns there. Data can become out of date really easily and quickly, and you've got the security element of that as well. In this day and age with GDPR, obviously what you're doing with people's personal data is really, really crucial. So they're two of the main triggers. Also, quite often clients are looking for somewhere to store sort of company documents and policies, things like handbooks. That's a good storage point for those. And another one is holidays. So we get a lot of clients come to us and say, we don't know what employees are doing with their holiday. We don't know who's taken holiday. We're not aware of what holiday balances we've got. So they're the main triggers for a lot of clients, and an HR system will give them all of that in one place.
Chris, I hear you talking to clients a lot about the practical benefits, usually to the line manager. So you talk to them about what it's going to be like when they've got all their data in one place and they can view it all. What are some of the things that you tell them that they'll really benefit from having a system?
Well, obviously, rectifying some of those things I've just spoken about. The security, having all your employee data on an HR system means that it's secure. An HR system will come with password protection. It'll come with levels of access, so you won't be able to change to allocate levels of access depending on someone's seniority within the business, and which teams they manage. A lot of HR systems that I've come across also have things, additional layers of security. So things like two-factor authentication is really useful, which a lot of people would have heard of. It's the process whereby you've got a constantly changing passcode that you have to add, as well as your usual password information. So that makes it incredibly secure, which means it's fully compliant with GDPR. It does give, from a practical point of view, it gives the employee everything they need in one place. So we talked about the storage of documents, so handbooks, company policies. It can replicate what in the old in the old days was personnel files. So it would have it contain a copy contract, it contain salary changes. I mean, in some cases, even pay slips are contained within that system, and it really does give the employees a kind of one-stop shop, if you like, for everything. And it also means that employees can update their own data in a lot of cases. So they can go in and change their phone number or their address if they've moved house. They can update their next of kin information. It kind of brings all that together. And it means that the managers aren't having to go and physically do that for them. The employees can do it themselves.
So you were saying to us yesterday, Karen, weren't you, that you can actually make it sort of formal policy that everyone essentially updates their own data.
I was listening to another HR commentator who was saying this very simple process whereby you have quite a lot of providers in the business who will communicate directly with employees, which can be a nightmare for HR. I mean, take pension. Now, people move businesses, that pension company will still keep the address of that person. You want them to be able to write to them. They're still writing and sending things. So they were just saying the really simple thing of having a self-service access system for employees and being really clear in your handbook under all of these kind of benefits, that it's the employee's responsibility to update their details, be it their home address or their beneficiaries under these schemes, and you put that responsibility clearly with them, and they have access to the system and they can go do it.
And then you can program a reminder, maybe just to go out once a year or once every 6 months, just to say to people, don't forget, update your details, so that everything still gets sent to the right place.
Absolutely.
And Chris, I have it in mind, just sort of from sort of anecdotally, that it's holiday management that seems to be the kind of biggest trigger, really. That it's obviously a process that everyone's involved in all the time. And therefore the potential for automating that is the one that really gets people sort of interested.
I think it's the biggest piece actually kind of saves time, if you like, saves admin time, is being able to automate holiday. So staff being able to go and request holiday through the system, and the managers having a very quick and easy way to authorise that holiday. We have a client who used to have a lot of issues with when the new holiday year opened for the following bookings open for the following year. The manager would come into a flurry of booking forms on his desk, sometimes all for the same date, and he had to decide who got their form on his desk first. Who knew? But a system takes all that away. It's all automated, it's in the system. The manager can authorise it. You can clearly see who's requested what, when. And actually for some systems where you've got a company-wide planner or a team-wide planner, the employee can go on and look and decide and see who else has already booked next Friday off, and actually is it really worth making that request, because actually there's 3 people off already, so it's really just not worth even putting the request in, kind of thing. So it gives them that oversight. It also allows managers to keep an eye on holiday through the year, so just to make sure that employees are taking their holiday. I know it sounds daft, but you do have employees out there. I'm sure we've all got them who just work and work and work. And actually, what you don't want is to get to the end of this time of year. If your holiday year runs to the calendar year, which a lot of businesses do, you get to this time of year and find that you've got a number of employees who've still got a number of days to take off, and that can actually be a real problem for the business in terms of being able to service their clients, etc. So being able to make sure that people are using their holiday, and that's important from a sort of mental health point of view these days. It's really important that people are taking a break. So being able to oversee at a glance that people are using their holiday, that's really, really helpful. And also a system would allow you to manage any carryover, so you haven't got to sit there and have a conversation or manually add holiday on to next year where people have been allowed to carry a few days over. You can program the system to do it all for you. And the new holiday year opens for the employee with their allowance for the year and what they've been allowed to carry from the previous year. So that's really useful. Claire and I spend a lot of time talking to people about part-time holidays, don't we, Claire? And how it's prorated and how you manage bank holidays in that respect, because if you're not doing it regularly, it can be tricky to get your head around. A system can automate that as well. You can enter the right information and it will calculate the holiday for you. And the same for things like starters and leavers. Obviously, they have a pro rata amount for the holiday year when they start or leave business. So yeah, the holiday part is really useful, and I think is the best time saver for people.
I've got an example there that we had just last week. Well, one of our clients who uses the system had a leaver. So we did the leaver process and we did the letter like usual, and I put in the holiday, and they'd undertaken their holiday, so they were going to get paid for it on leaving. I think some clients have lost track of just how much holiday people have got. Mm-hmm. And some of the holiday had been carried over from 2020. Because of COVID, it was far more. So the manager had done his own calculation. He prorated it himself. And then when he got our calculation, he came back and queried why the employee was essentially being paid so much more. Well, the answer was that he prorated the carryover holiday. But of course, you don't do that. I mean, I think he just naturally, took three half the year and halved everything. But this employee was entitled to all of the carryover without pro rata, and it's only this year that gets pro rata. Now, the system had done all that for me. So when I first looked, I thought, I don't really know the answer to that. But you could go into the system and it will show you the calculation, which I could then send him. And he then realised that he'd prorated the carryover and the employee was entitled to more. Now, that wasn't great news for him because this employee now had quite a big holiday payout on leaving. But I think there's a couple of things there. One is what the calculation is and you can share it with the employee, and the system's done it. It's not just your maths. And I think the other thing is, in terms of practical benefits, keep an eye on your holiday during the year. A system will run reports for you of where you stand in the holiday year, and if you are way behind the curve and somebody's taken nothing, and we're in November, you need to start saying to employees, you need to start taking some of this holiday, and you can kind of track it much better. And I think the other one that I get asked a lot is clients come and say, I've got a sickness absence problem with this employee, or it might be lateness. Lateness isn't quite so easy to track, but I've got a sickness problem, and I say, well, send me their absence record for the last year, and it's we don't capture the data. And it's kind of like, well, how can we have the conversation without the data? And they're like, well, anecdotally, I know they were off last Wednesday, and the previous, last month they were off on these dates. It's really hard to have a solid conversation with an employee without the data. So I think that's really important as well. Yeah.
Tracking sickness through an HR system, as you say, is far easier than trying to piece it together as a history when it becomes an issue. And actually, being able to see at a glance through the system what sickness has been taken can raise that issue earlier and maybe deal with it earlier before it becomes a real problem.
Yeah, that's true. I think we've got sorry, Ed, I was only going to say we've got another couple of clients who use it to remind them for some health and safety issues as well, haven't we? You know, if your health and safety policy's been updated, or I can think of a client who needs to check driving licenses or insurance documents once a year, that those kind of compliance issues, all of those reminders can go in the system as well, can't they?
I was just going to say, going back to the sick absence one, that some systems, the one we use certainly also provides a summary to the employee when they log in about their absences, and there's a bit of psychology behind that, because, you know, bringing people's sick absence records to their attention does often help or provide an impetus to kind of self-manage actually, and that you know, that's been a long held belief, or you know, a piece of research that says, you know, if you bring it to people, you know, if they can see the data for themselves, then actually that will often lead to an improvement on its own if it's a problem. So that's quite useful, as well as the fact that it will highlight, you know, certain triggers, you know, to managers if people pass certain levels. And I was also just going to go back one more step to the annual leave one, just because there's a sort of a side note to the bit about holiday carryover and the kind of situation that Karen described with her client, where suddenly they've realised they've got a big holiday accrual to pay at the end of someone's employment, and that is not to do with the system, but it's just a note to say, ensure that this is well covered in your arrangements, because I've been there as well with clients where they've had a very, what you might call kind of generous arrangement about holiday carryover, where they may not have particularly limited people's ability to carry over, either in terms of the number of days or the period of time that they have to use it. And at the end of the person's employment, that can lead to some very large balances to be dealt with. So just a note to ensure that you're really clear with people if you're allowing carryover, and if so, how much, and by when they need to use it, because that can be a little sort of time bomb waiting to go off when someone leaves, and it happens quite a lot actually. So especially now, when a lot of people were allowed to carry extra holiday over as a result of the pandemic. I think we've got clients with employees who've got way more holiday to utilise than they might have done historically. I want to say one more thing actually, that I think from the managing holiday, managing sickness, any of that kind of perspective, is that a lot of systems come with either it's built as a mobile friendly site, or they come with an app that employees can put on their phone. So it means that they can access the system from anywhere. So they're not, the guys in the warehouse, for example, can jump on and book their holiday just as easily as the accounts team sat at a desk in an office. So that, from that point of view, it's very practical as well. Yeah. Okay. So anything else on that? We talked about reminders. So in terms of other practical benefits I'm thinking about to help managers manage.
Yeah, should I take that? Yeah, I mean, Karen's already touched on it, and is absolutely right. A lot of systems will automate reminders for things like expiry of driving licenses and certificates from a health and safety perspective. But from a management point, people manager point of view, a system can also automate reminders for things like probation reviews. So where you've got a new starter, really important stuff around right to work as well. So checking documents on day one, and also expiry reminders. So we've got a client who have a lot of overseas staff, and a lot of them work on visas, and therefore they have an expiry date. And obviously it's really important that the business are across that. So it's really useful from that point of view to be able to ensure those crucial things don't fall down the gaps.
And can you begin to sort of automate some workflows as well? So, for example, if someone's probation period is almost due, it will, you know, I mean, not all systems, obviously, but some systems will obviously send a reminder, trigger a reminder, kind of with a form to fill in, or to remind people to go in and complete the online form. So everything.
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's not. Yes, is the answer. Yes, systems will. They're usually the quite high level systems. I think we're going to talk a bit later about what level of functionality you might want for a system, but certainly there are systems out there that will automate everything.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, we'll come back to that in a bit, maybe.
So I can talk a little bit about one of those levels of functionality if you want me to talk about ATS at the moment. Is that a good time to maybe cover that? So yeah. ATS, they're applicant tracking systems. I think probably you'll only bolt on an applicant tracking system, A, once you've got the basics of your system really sorted and up and running, and B, if you're going to be recruiting relatively intensively, so you really want the ability to manage quite a number of candidates. But most systems will have applicant tracking as part of it. You'll probably pay a bit extra for that. I would say from a recent experience we had where we ran quite a large recruitment on behalf of a client through the applicant tracking, the advantage for us was we had applications coming from numerous sources, so different websites and different online job boards. So they all come into the one place. That's a huge advantage. Then we could all access them. So there was more than one of us dealing with, we had more than one vacancy. And so we could all go in and see the relevant vacancies that we were dealing with. We could then obviously highlight to each other which candidates we were putting forward, and it shows where the candidate is in the process. So you could move them forward. If somebody else took over the communication for you, then they could easily see where the client was, where the candidate was, and what the last update was that they got from us, what stage they were at in the process. And we could very easily share that with the manager who was recruiting, because they had access as well. And then when the candidate moved through the process, either to success or not, the system would generate those messages for us. So bearing in mind, I think we were recruiting for something like 12, 15 roles within a couple of month period. The others will correct me in a minute, but it felt like quite a lot.
It was.
We certainly had a high number of applications. I don't think we could have managed that any other way except with an applicant tracking on the system. So,
and it captured things like CVs and notes and stuff as well. So it was everything. Whoever went into any particular candidate could see everything to do with that candidate.
Yeah.
And those that were taken on, the relevant data just sort of like flows straight through into the
starter wizard,
into the starter process for the system, because it's all connected up. So it's all one sort of seamless flow of information. Yeah. Okay. What other things are maybe less obvious in relation to, but things that we've nevertheless found useful, in a system?
I'd say probably the system we use, People HR has an e-sign functionality within it. So a lot of you will be familiar with things like DocuSign. We've all had to use those a lot more, I think, over the last couple of years. But certainly the e-sign functionality within People HR has proved invaluable, actually. We've got a client in London who have a retail and event space in central London, and they, as they were able to open up again as restrictions eased earlier this year, they had quite a wide range of health and safety protocols and policies that they wanted their staff to be aware of, and sort of signed to say that they had read and understood what was expected of them. And we were able to add these to People HR for all the staff to sign up to. We were able to easily run a report afterwards that showed who'd signed and who hadn't, and automated reminders were then sent from the system to chase up those staff to get them to sign up to what was required. I mean, I can't imagine trying to do that with bits of paper or emails with sort of 60 staff. It just, it just made life so much easier for the client and for us in managing that, and just was one less thing for them to worry about as they kind of had to navigate their way through reopening their site and having the public return to the shop and the events venue. So yeah, that's really useful, and they're not the only client I think that's found that really useful.
Good. And then there are things like, you start to think about, can we do our appraisals online and things like that?
Yeah, a lot of HR systems will have additional modules that we can add, things like an appraisal system that you can tailor to your own questions, your own requirements, and track an individual's progress through the system. Have they seen it? Has their manager seen it? Have the outcomes been agreed and shared? And training in the same way. So Karen was talking about health and safety certificates, and the training that sits alongside those can be coordinated through an HR system potentially, where you can create a training event, you can allocate staff or invite staff to attend, and again you can see who attended and potentially then generate reminders for any courses where they need to be repeated after a certain amount of time. So for example, like a first aid training, for example, your certificate would expire after 3 years, and so the system would know who went, know when they went, and therefore know when those certificates expire.
Yeah, I'm just going to chip in quickly, Ed, with my sort of slight bugbear about performance management on an HR system. I've had this conversation more than once, and it usually comes from clients who operate in the technology sector. And what they want to set up is a performance management system that they can do entirely via the technology. So they just want to tick boxes and give some scores and get the employee to, tick their box at the bottom, and that's it. So my rider to that is, look, the most important part about the process is the conversation you have with the employee. So, appraisals are not always popular with managers. Sometimes they're not popular with employees either. They really don't want to sit in the room together. But whatever you design on a system still has to be supported with at least a decent conversation and some feedback and some two-way exchange. So don't hide too much behind your HR system.
No, it never replaces the conversation, does it?
No,
exactly. And I think because a lot of people are remote, we're all doing this sitting in different places, which we wouldn't have been, a couple of years ago, probably. So the systems can be really, obviously serve us really well when we're all physically sort of distributed, but also that people can get a bit too hooked on the technology and forget the human interface that also
I don't mind an appraisal on Zoom. I mean, at least you see each other and you talk to each other. It's when you just want to load it all through technology and just send each other a message and some scores that it's not great.
Indeed. And we're going to come on in a minute to talk about some other sort of technologies that we use in the course of our business, but let's just talk first of all a little bit about what people should consider when they're sort of choosing and implementing their systems. What should they think about?
I'll go first, and then you guys probably will have some other things to add. I think primarily think about what your current functionality needs to be. So this applies in your personal life as well, doesn't it? It's easy to get carried away with what a system can do, and then you spend quite a lot of money on it and you never use that functionality, and before you know it you need to upgrade or replace. So ideally choose current functionality. So if you're starting from scratch, you just need a decent database that's going to capture the core information that we want. It'll take you a while to get up and running with that, just be familiar with that. Then add on performance management, add on the ATS as and when you're going to recruit. so that you can use it straight away. You know, you just won't get into it if you don't need it right away. You can keep it very simple. So think about current functionality, think about what suits the size of your business. Some of these systems are very big, very comprehensive, probably far too complicated for what you need. So keep it really simple, and start as early as you can. Don't think that an HR system is just for when you've got, you know, quite a few employees. The best implementations that Chris and Claire will run are when there are actually very few employees. We can do it for any number, but if you imagine starting almost from scratch when your employee numbers are quite low, it's such a simple, such a cheap, easy process to get in place. And then you have those processes in place and you're then scaled and ready to grow. Whereas when you've grown and you implement it afterwards, it's just a more difficult job. And by then, probably as a manager, you are already dealing with all sorts of issues of HR admin that have become quite time consuming by then. So do it early. Systems can be personalized. Chris does all that for our clients. So, you know, working hours, your holiday year, your hierarchy, who reports to who, get all of that worked out, all of the confidentiality levels and who will see what, you know, that's really important when you're implementing. So that needs some thought. And once that's in place, your employees will all report through to the right manager and you'll have your data secure and only open to those who should be seeing it. I think particularly my last point would be who you choose as your administrator. Somebody needs to be really system savvy, but they will also have access to all your data. They will see all the salaries. They will see all of the letters that are attached to people's files. They will need absolute discretion and confidentiality and need to be in a highly trusted position. So the choice of administrator, I think, is really important before you even get started.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in small businesses where you maybe don't have an HR person in that position of knowing all of, you know, all of that stuff, that for some clients that then sits with us, just to say, you know, that can sit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elsewhere, and that's a service that we do provide in situations where maybe the company director obviously has access but isn't going to be actually utilising the system on a day-to-day basis, and so that admin, that sort of super admin role, then might sit with us.
Yeah, I think going back to what you were saying, Karen, about starting small and scaling up if you can, is really good, because when we've got two clients, we did an implementation recently for a client, a relatively new business with a very small number of employees, and so actually start to finish the whole process was pretty quick. They had their data ready, there wasn't masses of data, it was very straightforward. We've got another client who've got quite a lot more employees who are trying to extract their data from another HR system. And that's taking much longer because they're much bigger and they've got to double check that data before we can then put it into the new system. So it's becoming quite a time intensive sort of process to get to before we even get to the system setup. So yeah, if you can start small, then that's great.
And the other thing about starting small is your costs start small as well. So, you know, I remember the days when if you were going to go and buy a system, you had to buy a great big bit of software for a lot of money. And so that, you know, doing it when you only had a small number of employees was cost prohibitive. Well, now, of course, with software as a service and everything else, you're literally paying per head. So, you know, so a minimal introduction with a small number of employees, you know, if you only need to pay £50 a month or something for something that gives you this amazing functionality, you know, that does make it a lot more feasible to be able to start small and scale it up as you go. Don't forget, everyone, do post some questions if you have them in the chat function, and we'll be more than happy to come to those. let's move on a little bit though and talk about, I mean, so far we've talked about like a core HR type system. There are other things around it that also we've come across and utilized, or some of our clients are that we've learned from. So let's have a quick look at those. So one type of system that many of our clients look at is something around sort of shift management, time recording, rota management. And Chris, I know that's something that one of your big clients is
yeah,
utilizing.
absolutely. It's something that's really useful, particularly for things like the hospitality sector, where you haven't got regular shifts. It's a real mishmash of who's working when, and being able to schedule all of that and include things like when people are on holiday or are away for other reasons, to be able to see that and plan your roster and be able to see very quickly that you're covered with the right number of staff at the right time is really useful. They find it really crucial to managing their team and therefore managing the experience for their customers.
Okay, and another thing that we've certainly used to improve our efficiency is around gathering references, background checks, and all of that kind of thing. And Claire, I know that you've kind of led the charge on that part of our service. So tell us a little about that.
So requesting references for new starters can be a really time-consuming process. You normally have to send them a form which they then complete, and that comes back to you, and then you contact the referees and wait for it to come back. You might have to chase them up, but there are systems available where all you have to do is send an online form to the employee, and then that really is your part done. They put in the reference details, that automates a request to the referees. You'll get a notification when they've all come back, and the system will also send automatic reminders to everyone. When everything's complete, you just get a downloadable report that will highlight any differences, any areas of concern, any negative comments. And it takes something that could take you 20 minutes a person to something that takes 5. It really takes out the legwork and makes it much more efficient. So it's valuable if you're hiring a lot.
Yeah, and again, it covers from a sort of privacy and consent point of view. It goes via the employee, so the whole issue about who you're talking to about what is automatically kind of covered. And you can add into that, obviously other types of check, like CRB, credit. Different employers have different requirements around these, criminal record checks, etc.
Yeah, and so some of the checks are standard. So like the background checks, they'll come with set questions, but if it's just an employment reference you're after, you can include what questions you'd like to include. I suppose it also removes the awkward situation where you might request a reference when someone hasn't actually resigned yet. It sits with the employee and they'll put the information when they're ready. So that's another positive. It removes that risk. Something else I just wanted to say on the core HR system that I don't know if we've mentioned it already, but in terms of tracking sickness absence, there's also functionality to do self-certification forms on there as well, and return to work interviews. It removes the need for a paper form, and you just choose if you think a return to work interview is going to be required. So if it's a longer period of absence, you can tick a box to say a doctor's note required if it's longer than 7 days. So just a point I wanted to mention on sickness absence. So there's other parts to it that the system can accommodate as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really useful, that.
Yeah. Great. One of the other ways in which we use technology is associated with the recruitment process, or development, in fact, is around the setting of different types of questionnaires. So in recruitment, for example, we might incorporate a psychometric questionnaire into the process, or an ability test There are lots of different tests available for different types of role. Different employers have different needs, and obviously looking to easily kind of add some value into their selection process by way of, you know, not just an interview, but some accessing some different types of data that help you to make a good kind of robust selection decision. And of course, these all used to be paper and pen. I mean, I can remember those now. Not many people can now, but you know, where you used to have to, if you wanted to do that, you were talking about getting people in and, you know, paper and pencil and sending them off to the assessment company, and then you got to a point where you could scan it in, and an automatic reader would literally scan the bit of paper that people had put their marks on, and all of that kind of stuff. Well, it was so labor intensive, it's hard to believe it these days. But of course, now all of that's online as well. So when we're working with clients and we're adding different aspects into their selection processes, we can go online to different providers, and we can set all of that up online. Candidates get a link, they log in securely, they fill in the questionnaire, and the results get automatically sent back. Now, obviously, when that comes to psychometrics, you can't just go and do that. You need to be kind of registered and trained in the psychometric tools in order to be able to do that. But you know, so if you are registered, obviously you're doubtless aware that you've got that facility. If not, then again, you can do it through a third party like us, for example, where we've got the training and the registrations, and we can set those things up and add them into your recruitment processes in order to add that additional value to those. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Nothing's popped in. Nothing's popped in. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll draw things to a close, and with just by seeing if everybody on the panel has got sort of one last tip to leave us with as we bring things to a close. So Chris, what would your kind of parting piece of advice be?
I think a good HR system, if you get a good HR system and build it and get it set up so it works well for you, it can make things so much more efficient and save you so much time. And that then frees up your managers to do what they're supposed to be doing, what they do best.
Very good. Who'd like to go next, Claire?
So I suppose for me, I've always think that data reporting is valuable. I'm really big on data and analysis, and having a HR system in place means that you can produce reports tailored to your exact needs, whatever that might be. It might be for an audit, it might be for some employees' liability, whatever you need it for. A HR system really is the best and easiest way for you to get the data you need.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, I mean, the whole thing about reward in terms of, you know, you can keep a record of all the different elements of your reward packages, and you know, there are total reward statements that are possible on some systems if you want people to see what sort of total value of their package of benefits are and all of that. I mean, there are lots of other things that we haven't touched on, but you know, that's a really good one there. Yeah.
We have had one question come in. Sorry, Karen, I know you're probably and the question is, what system would you recommend? And I suppose really the answer would be, it really depends on your needs. Like you were saying earlier, Karen, you need to decide on what you need from a system before you really decide which is best for you. There's many out there that could serve all sorts of functions. So I think you just need to think about what it is you need from the system.
We obviously work with a couple. We didn't want to make this about a sales pitch for the system that we use, to be perfectly honest, because that's not what we're trying to do. We just wanted to talk about how technology can help. Obviously, I mean, if anybody did want to have a look at the system that we use and are familiar with, then that would be absolutely more than welcome to contact us, or we can come back to you and set that up. And at least that would at least give you a kind of benchmark to say, you know, that if you then wanted to explore the market further, in order to find something, we do have there are a couple of options that we have. We're not wedded to one provider, and in fact there are two systems that we feel have slightly different, you know, strengths and weaknesses according to the type of size you are and what you kind of need. So, you know, but so by all means, if you want to see if you want us to show you what we use, absolutely get in touch. We'll be more than happy to do that.
I've had a second question. When using a HR system, how transportable is the information you put in? If you want to switch from one HR system to another, how easy would that be to do? And I suppose that kind of harks back to my big selling point for HR systems is the data you can report from it. You normally, when switching from one to another, you go through data migration. So exporting all of your data from your existing system and then manipulating it into whatever format it needs to be in to upload to the new system. So it's easy to do in theory. In practice, you're kind of relying on all the information in your system to be accurate. So that's why you need to, you know, put the emphasis with the employees that they need to make sure all of their details are correct. So in theory, it's quite straightforward to do. I don't know if anyone wanted to add.
Yeah. Well, I think it's always a good opportunity to clean up your data while you're doing that. Is, you know, to make sure it's all up to date, so that what you put into the new one is correct. The other thing I would say is most providers, I say most, I think I'm probably, Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, but most providers I think will offer you a kind of a free migration service where they'll kind of help you to organize and upload the data in a mass format into the new system.
They'll give you the option to be able to upload it in bulk. They'll provide that upload service. And so yes, you're right, you can clean up your data and then upload into the new system what you know is to be good and correct, and as Claire says, you've then got some really good data to use for what you need.
I think we're right in saying, you know, the kind of cloud-based providers that we use for HR systems, I mean, it's your data, so that they're not going to stop you from moving, and they're not going to make that difficult. So you can, you know, you can move your data on, can't you? I don't know if there are providers that prevent you in any way from moving. Certainly it wouldn't be a good idea to go with a provider like that, because you know, you may actually outgrow the system you're in. You know, we were talking about functionality earlier. You know, sometimes clients want to move from one provider to another because they want a better sync to their payroll system, for instance, and two systems might talk better to each other. So you certainly don't want to be trapped, and a good provider shouldn't trap you in.
No, the only restriction you sometimes come up against is obviously notice period. So you might have a notice period you need to see out with a current system provider before you can move on to a new one. But it doesn't, I mean, that shouldn't stop you exporting the data, you know, and migrating it.
I don't think that's definitely not an issue with system providers.
I know what you're going to say now, Ed. Yeah. Some other providers.
There are some HR providers, and I would say, I mean, no names, no petrol, but some of the bigger ones, let's say, who do not make it easy for you to transfer your data. So if you might be with a certain well-known HR service provider who is maintaining your data in a system that you have access to, if you want to move away from them, they do not always give you back the data in a form that makes it easy for you to transfer it into another system. So if you're looking at HR providers, that's definitely one area to make sure that your data is going to be that you're going to be able to do whatever you like with your data ultimately without needing to kind of rekey it or start from scratch. If you ever wanted to move. just to say that from our, if we're working with a client on systems, we register the system, we set up the system, we handle the migration, we can provide the system administrator duties. If and when that client decides to move on from us, they take the system with them. So it's not our system. You know, it's an independent system, and you take it with you. So there's no issue there. You don't even have to migrate it out of our system and into someone else's. You literally just pick it up and take it with you. So
yeah.
Okay, so thanks for those questions, very good ones. I'm really glad that that they came up.
Yeah, thanks for the comments too. It's good to know that it's useful.
Good. Karen, I think we were going to hear your pearl of wisdom.
Oh, so you are. I was going to say, if you don't have an HR system, I'm not quite sure how you're managing. So I would say, do take a look. You'll probably be quite surprised at how cost effective they are. So that's really the first thing. And then the second thing is, when you do have it, please make sure you use it effectively. So everything we were saying about the data and your administrator, you know, really make the most of it. I think your employees will be looking at you as a business, wondering why you're not using technology for their data, why they can't access their personal data, why they can't apply for their holiday on an app. So I think they will expect you to be making the best use of it. So that's really what I'd say, you know, kind of get up to date, really.
I don't think I can really add anything to what my colleagues have already said. What I would say is calculate the savings. You know, there are some very tangible time and cost savings to be made. And the cost benefit analysis these days on HR systems is really easy. You know, I mean, we started off by saying, you know, just take one big process. What's your biggest HR, you know, administration process? It's normally around annual leave or something like that. Just look and see how much of someone's time you can save by automating it, and you will already have probably paid for the system just on that one alone, and then you get all the other subsidiary benefits you know, in that too. So, you know, it's well worth it. Good. So are there any more questions? Are we there?
I think so.
Good. All right, well, thanks ever so much everyone for joining us. Sorry for the shaky start. And but we will be cleaning it up and putting it on the community platform if there was anything you wanted to refer back to, but also to give an opportunity to other members of the community to take a look if they want to. Our next session in December is around, I think, sick absence management, and then in the new year we're talking about mental health, and we are going to be adding some content to the platform around that in terms of general well-being information, hopefully things actually that you could share with your employees around supporting their mental health and kind of looking after their well-being. So look out for those, and we will keep in touch with you via the platform, let you know what's going on and what new things are being posted. But in the meantime, thank you very much indeed for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next time.